Welcome to A Gay and a Non-Gay. Picture this, it's the 90s. Mixtapes are happening. You're writing actual letters, there's no DMs, and if you're gay, the US government is trying to stop you from being with the person you love.
Yes, and I guess today he knows exactly what that feels like because he lived through it and then he's written a book about it.
Yay! Please welcome Jeremy Atherton Lin. Woo. How are you?
I'm okay, thanks. How are you?
Yeah, really good. Now, you're an award-winning author. You've written for the Paris Review, the Guardian, the Yale Review, GQ, basically loads of places that make me feel really dumb but more intelligent when I read them. Your first book, Gay Bar, was huge and about the importance of gay bars in queer culture. In a nutshell, how would you say they're important?
They have provided a safe space, but a lot of what I talk about in Gay Bar is ways in which they haven't always been the most welcoming to all people. They were a place to go where you could let down your figurative hair. But yeah, a lot of that book is about looking around the room and thinking, what am I doing here? Do I belong?
Yes.
But then that kind of comes back full circle.
Right.
In terms of the fact that that's why they're important.
Well, it's funny because we're not here to talk about that, and this is still just the intro. Yeah.
It's not really a nutshell kind of...
but it isn't a nutshell, quite a question. But yeah, I like that you answered that with past tense, like they have been, because they can be.
Oh, no, that's just me. I'm retired.
Right.
I'm like a retired G-A-Y. I'm like a lifelong gay, but I'm like a retired G-A-Y.
No, you've hung up the wig? You've hung up the poppers?
Not the poppers.
Great. So we're going to talk about your brand new book, Deep House, which is the ultimate queer love story. And it's set in the era of forbidden romance when gay couples were denied basic rights. I mean, to an extent, still are, right?
So this book is basically your love story, right?
At its heart, yeah.
Yeah.
One of these things we've been saying about it recently is it's a romantic comedy haunted by centuries of gay ghosts.
Yeah.
Because, like my kind of thing is that I write about myself, but then I write about other people too. Or I write about my experience, but then I write about people who came before me, like history, my family, and it gets expansive and expansive and expansive. So it's our love story, but there are like lovebirds from the 70s, even the 1500s.
Wow.
Yeah.
And what made you write it in a way, because it sort of goes back and forth between the narrative and the history of politics in America? What made you...
I think what happens is people say, oh, what you do is very particular. Like you combine, memoir with history, say, and there's a lot of like political debate and legal battles and so on in this book. And people say, oh, this is very unique, and but I think that is how people talk. I mean, obviously the book is like pretty heavily researched. I spent a few years writing it and all that stuff, but it's not like it is how I want to write how I would like to have a conversation with something about a given topic.
Yeah.
And when you talk about something, you don't want to just keep talking about your own experiences, right? You want to have some kind of like other sense of the world.
Yeah.
Into it.
We're getting 30 years on since the Defence of Marriage Act.
Yeah.
That'll be next year, right?
Yeah.
How do you feel about that era now, the early 90s and the...
Politically?
Yeah.
One thing that I think is probably pretty important about this book is that it should be a lot of fun, because we were having a lot of fun. So in a nutshell,
I don't even know why I said that earlier. I never use that phrase. In a nutshell.
The closest that I can get to an elevator pitch, if we were in like a skyscraper, is I met my partner. Yes, in 1996, like literally the week that the Defense of Marriage Act was introduced to Congress. So that kind of created a federal definition of marriage as being only a man and a woman, and by extension, one of the rights that there's something like 1,000 rights that married couples have in America, and one of them is immigration. Yeah. Or access to immigration. So I met him, a Brit, and we didn't have any way to be together. So we were long distance, hence the mixtapes and the letters that you mentioned. And then he wound up just staying undocumented in San Francisco. So in answer to your question, one of the things that I think is important, but I would never have nostalgia for like an oppressive era.
Yeah.
However, I do think it's important to show how much fun we had.
Yeah.
Because I think, for instance, a contemporary reader who is like, I know the world seems like there's no light at the end of the tunnel, but just to have that feeling like when it feels like there can be no light at the tunnel, still I'm going to like flick my lighter and have a little party in the corner of that deep, dark tunnel, or just like make my own light somehow. Yeah. And I think that's what really drove my sense of that time in this book is like, I want you to be there and think, this really sucks. However, there's love to be had and communication and connection to be had.
But I think that's what makes me feel lucky for being gay. And we've talked about this before. I feel lucky because despite all of the oppression, well, in spite of it, I think, but also it's part of it, isn't it? Part of all of the hardship we have to go through and that fight to be extra, that constant need to be more because we've been told we can't be, pushes us into places that we would never have normally gone. So I kind of feel sometimes that I'm lucky that I'm gay because it means that I'm fighting harder. Like I would never be doing the things I'm doing in my life if I wasn't bullied for being gay, if I wasn't told that I wasn't allowed to do certain things. I've turned up my volume and made myself brighter because of that, and I think that's such a blessing. So I hear what you're saying about lighting, you know,
flicking a lighter
in a tunnel.
Or it gives you a different perspective on things. Like, for instance, there's a part in the book where I talk about how, young people then, and to an extent continue to be, are like basically told to hide their identity, either tacitly or directly instructed to lie about who they are when they're young. So you become a liar, and then you kind of make, I mean, not everybody, but in a lot of situations, right, in some kind of like, more conservative area, you don't have the access to sort of whatever, be your truth self, or always say the honest truth when somebody asks you who you have a crush on or something like that, right? You morph that. I don't know. There's this part in the book where I talk about kind of morphing that into something else, like this idea of like having this make-believe life that's so full. And like, I know so many gays that just like basically love being pretentious because they grew up pretending, and like pretend is a part of their world and their life. And like that kind of informs, and manifests in different ways, whether people are theatrical or, whatever. But you're always this idea that maybe those kinds of experiences can maybe make you think of things in a different way and be playful about some of the stuff that you've encountered.
You mentioned something a second ago about contemporary readers having a lesson, and I had a bit of a history lesson reading it because Bill Clinton's had a bit of a pink wash, right? I think people forget that actually, and I think I probably forgot until I read the book, that actually he wasn't particularly an ally to the LGBT community.
Yeah, I mean, I think I probably forgot before I researched the book how how kind of like willing he was to roll over. I mean, I knew he wasn't like an ally the way that we understand them now, but I was like, he was doing the best that he can then during the time. But he really did kind of roll over. And I mean, there's even a Hillary. There's a book called The Engagement by Sasha Eisenberg, which is like the political history of gay marriage, and he quotes this letter that she had written as the wife of when he was the governor of Arkansas. And she wrote a letter to somebody, kind of assuring some kind of member of the community that like they didn't want it. I mean, it was a bit like and those are kind of a bit of a reward in a way. Like there are so many moments when you're doing research where you're like, yes, like, I mean, it's horrible to say, but like when they're like ugly moments, there's a part of you as somebody as a writer who's just like, oh wow, this is big, and also I kind of like when it's messy. Like, it's not this book isn't just going to be Republicans versus Democrats. Because that's too easy.
There's a lot more going on than that, isn't there?
You said you'd always write this story, but what finally made you decide to do it?
I guess that probably has to do with, to me, it's a little wild, but I don't think I necessarily thought that anybody would want to publish it or that it was a story that would be deemed worth telling. And now I think that seems wild because I don't know of any other story about, like, I don't know of any other sort of, I would say like mainstream, but like a book that's come out in a relatively mainstream way about a couple who struggled to stay together because of immigration problems, that they didn't have access to immigrate in the way that straight couples have had. Sometimes you have to convince yourself, like, I have a story. In other words, I think this is a very long-winded way of saying, I think when I wrote Gay Bar, I was like, I can tell this story because people think that I'm going to be this voice who comes in and talks about a topic. And it sounds juicy and you get to like open the door or go through the glory hole and get like a peek inside like what the gays are up to, you know, and like on the dance floor and in the dark room. And once I had established myself as a writer, I was a bit like, I am very present in that book, but I'm like, but I can go deeper. I mean, literally deep house, right? Like I can go deeper if you want it. And I do think all of a sudden now it just seems really salient because everything is so up in the air. And as I was writing it, the Dobbs decision was announced by the Supreme Court, which is the case that struck down Roe v. Wade, and hence the right to have access to abortion across the U.S. And in his concurring opinion, Justice Clarence Thomas literally names Obergefell, which is the gay marriage case, as something that needs to, you know, he thinks be deemed to be reviewed. So, you know, things are pretty precarious.
When do you think that could happen?
It's a hard one because I think that, I mean, I can never predict the future. And I think now it's like, it seems so unpredictable, you know? Like,
yeah, it just, I suppose it seems odd that hasn't happened
Would
yet.
you predict that like Grimes' weird auto geek billionaire boyfriend would be like in charge of the United States of America? Like just everything is so like, we were talking about this earlier. We're like, what, Grimes? Like, you know, I mean, not that, you know, she has anything to do with it, but just like the connections between things seem so far-fetched.
Yeah.
That like, just like little things that you think are just kind of like that cool little song that we dance to sometimes is now a part of like the story of this like world that is just like so unreal. So,
who knows?
So who knows? But I think the reason that I bring that up is I think that a lot of times it really, in this case, it's so subjective. So it has so much to do with somebody like Peter Thiel, who's gay and who's really powerful. If he has any influence, like gay men and lesbians might get out of it better than trans people are currently.
Do you have deja vu?
Currently?
Yeah.
Right this moment?
Not like
I think the fact that you're saying it is making me kind of have it right this moment.
Oh, really?
Well, you know, are you having deja vu?
Maybe. I just mean like, does it feel like we're repeating history?
Oh, I see what you're saying. No, not at all.
Okay.
No, not at all. I think the main difference would be there was so much proceduralism then.
Yeah.
And so even though people were saying absolutely ridiculous things, they were still in the context of like some sense of like performed decorum. So I would spend a lot of time watching like House Judiciary Committee meetings and stuff like that. And it's still, there's something very like nonstop offensive about the comments that are being delivered.
Yeah.
But also kind of all kind of normalized somehow, the edges softened, all that kind of stuff. And I think now it's like a total free-for-all. Like it's like anarchic, you know?
It was almost respectful whilst being disrespectful before, whereas now it's out and out.
Yeah. Part of that did need to break, you know? And I mean, I think the Democrats and kind of moderate liberals in the United States play it very safe. And they're so attached to these institutions that people keep telling them again and again are broken. And there are instances in my book where people from a liberal or a left kind of place have tried to exploit loopholes and break through and find workarounds and the kind of stuff that now it just seems like is the provenance of the right. Like right-wing people are very good at like getting what they want by like any means necessary. And it seems a little bit disingenuous for the kind of like Democrat establishment to say, oh, but everything should be done in the correct way and all that kind of stuff. Is like, that's not really how people operate. So an example would be like in San Francisco, when we were living there, Gavin Newsom, who's now the governor of California and was the mayor of San Francisco then, just sanctioned same-sex marriages. So everybody, like thousands of people started coming to San Francisco. Rosie O'Donnell, the comedian and talk show host, came, and like people just got married, and then it jump-started this whole court battle that basically various strands of it kind of wind up leading up to the Supreme Court case in 2005. I mean, they're interrelated with strands that lead to up to Obergefell in 2015. But the thing about it is that those loopholes and those punching through, I mean, it does also there. It's like one step forward, two steps back as a part of that. As a part of that game. So in 2004, when John Kerry lost the presidency, people blamed those marriages in San Francisco because the spectacle of it made such a bad impression on people. And who knows? But one way of looking at it is if Kerry had won Ohio, he would have won the presidency, and Ohio also happened to have a gay marriage, an anti-gay marriage bill that was being voted on that year too. So if that brought people out, that would be the analysis. So I'm kind of trying to think about some of these things, like what could your tactics be? Like, do you want to pull like, a pretty awesome move like that and just start gay marriages, or is it going to backfire? Is sometimes that backfire worth it? Because look, we do have gay marriage a few years down. It's not a direct causality, but it's all part of the same story.
But would Obama have done it if he was up for re-election?
Obama wasn't super pro gay marriage. I mean. But then again, am I? Like he was he was like, I was on my way over here.
Yeah.
And I was like, marriage is kind of like Itsu.
The sushi place.
The sushi chain.
Yeah.
Like when we were in this position and we weren't like, oh, we really want rings and to wear tuxedos and to be, have two tuxedo clad groom figurines on top of a wedding cake and dance to ABBA and all that kind of stuff. We were just like, well, this would solve our problem. The book is all about us wanting to be together.
Yeah.
So gay marriage becomes this kind of political strand that runs through it, but it was never and in fact, a lot of the various players of historical players who like pushed to have their relationship recognized somehow weren't particularly like, gay marriage wasn't a priority for them either. It had something to do with crossing a border, some kind of practical thing that needed to be achieved. How does this relate to Itsu?
Yeah,
because I was on my way over and I was thinking I could use a little snack. I would like some Itsu. And I was thinking to myself, and then I passed this like independent sushi restaurant and I was like, really, I should take a risk on this place and like on principles.
Yeah.
Contribute to local businesses, which contribute to a more diverse city street. And, but there was this other part of me that was just like, but I know it'll be safe at Itsu. I like don't necessarily agree with like huge corporate chains and all that, but like it'll have gone through this certain like,
process.
Standards.
Yeah.
And I think that we do that in a way where we're like, marriage is the answer because it feels like familiar. I think that's what I'm getting. So marriage is the answer because it feels familiar. It's the Itsu. It's like the sushi that you think this will be okay. I mean, then again, that spy was poisoned in an Itsu, but that had nothing to do with the Itsu itself. But you never know what's going to happen in life.
Yeah.
But anyway, and then I saw a Pret, and I was like, I could go to this Pret, but I don't want to. And then I remembered an old little tiny, independent curry house around the corner, and they gave me free vegetables. But the point is, I think same thing with my book about gay bars. I think if I'm approaching something with ambivalence, where I'm kind of like, gay bars, yes and no. Marriage, like, yes, we needed it in terms of like, in a just practical way.
Yeah.
But do I believe in like this patriarchal institution and so on and so forth? And do I think that it's like the only answer? No. And I think that's where I always want to come from on this.
I think it's interesting, like in this country we had civil partnerships,
Yeah.
and the straight people fought for the right to be able to have a civil partnership because they don't believe.
That's
in
how
marriage.
that's how I came over here.
And I suppose that's your point. It's like that isn't necessarily the right fit
It
for
was
anyone anyway.
Yeah, civil partnerships was fine with me.
Yeah.
The thing about it is it's not international. It's not transnational.
And when you say like recognized, what does that mean in reality? Like,
I'm married in both countries.
Okay.
So like, you know, it's like, I mean, there was a moment when we would leave the UK before you know, when it was civil partnerships here and we hadn't converted to a marriage and there wasn't gay marriage yet in the States, we would leave the UK as family and enter into the United States as
not
legally as strangers, you know.
Yeah, which is crazy. But say if you were flying into San Francisco, you wouldn't be at that time.
It wouldn't be. It wouldn't have any legal standing whatsoever. No.
Oh, really?
No.
So those marriages were 2/3 of a marriage, or
the ones that were the ones that were sanctioned. Yeah. And they flip-flopped. They were
really?
they were like legal. I think a lot of the people who pushed through in these moments, a lot of the instances when other cities did it too. It was like it became a little bit of a thing. So a town in New York started doing it, and a town in an area of Portland, a county in Oregon that includes Portland started doing it. And and if there wasn't anything on the books that said, you know,
you can't do it.
You can't do it. You could kind of flip through it for a while, and maybe it only functions on the city level, state level, and so on and so forth. All these kinds of things. But it is interesting. I mean, I'm not a political strategist or anything like that. You know, I just like talk about my own experience and what I find interesting and so on. But I do think it is very interesting to think about how we can maybe try to push through on some civil rights stuff and some kind of progressive causes by seeing where the rules bend rather than by always being so by the rules.
Yeah.
Your partner, you've been with them since 1996.
Right.
I mean, and we're not talking about the most remarkable thing yet in this entire conversation, which is the fact that you've been together that long. That's amazing. In gay years, that's what, like, well.
Would you think so to look at my face?
No. But that's a considerable amount of time for a gay couple, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, you know, there's a really important part of the book where we open up our relationship, and we have because we were kids together, we grew up together, and there's a really important part of the book where we open up our relationship, and we have these roommates who, it was a very tense, like it's funny tense situation of two gay couples trying to live in the same space together, but they were open and they kind of like taught us by osmosis like what the possibilities of that could be. I'm not saying that that's the answer, but I do think maybe finding your own path and not necessarily just sticking to the norms. And I also think it's kind of also like the fact that we had to fight for it, and even the fact that we had to fight for it through doing really boring bureaucratic paperwork, doing the admin. It's kind of really meaningful because you find somebody who's willing to do this stuff with you. Yeah. The application process for me to come over here on a visa with the intention to become a civil partner, all this kind of stuff. It's like, I just feel like it's probably the most boring and like disappointing answer I could possibly give. The fact that like I just fall further in love with him when just like sitting on the floor doing forms. The fact that somebody's actually willing to do that with you, and I think maybe that's kind of what this book is about in some ways. Is like all these systems that you're up against, and how can you kind of like work the system in order to just go and like run into the sea and play in the sand and live the way that you actually really want. None of us want these systems.
But at the start, your relationship was long distance, right?
The start was long distance.
And you didn't have WhatsApp or any apps like that. You had to write
long letters. And when I went through, I mean, I think the book, it says in the book exactly how many pages his first letter is to me, which is something like 14. And the handwritten mixtapes. They're decorated with stickers. There are like, you know, flyers for clubs that we've collected for each other and things we've cut out of magazines and things that he's an artist, so things that he drew for me, things that I drew badly for him, photographs, you know.
You talked about prose and you said that you try to write like sex or music. Do you mean you try to write like it is sex, or music? Or do you mean
I
write
think,
about those things?
I think a good thing to do for anybody who's listening who's a writer is to like take some time off from the writing, when it feels like when it's not flowing, or when you everybody, a part of what you do is to, like, a part of what a painter does is to sit in the room and,
A panda.
A painter.
Oh.
A part of what a panda does is chew its bamboo leaves. But a part of what a painter does is be a panda in terms of like sitting in a room and thinking about what that painting could possibly be, rather than like constantly painting, right? Like just kind of inhabiting it or whatever. That's a part of any process. So I would say for people who want to write, like, one thing you could do is masturbate.
So take a minute, masturbate.
Yeah.
Be in your own.
Well, not more than a minute.
Right.
I'm not talking about wanking. I'm talking about like inhabiting a sensual state of like. Sorry, the word sensual sounds so creepy and gross.
You mean like meditate or just be at one?
No, I mean have sex with yourself. But I mean, or with somebody else, or with many people, whatever you want to do. But I think there's something. Why wouldn't you want to try to inhabit as close as you can to like the most like out of, like, sorry to sound corny, but like out of body experience that you can have, like, that feeling about when you're like, I can't believe I'm this turned on. I'm like so overwhelmed by I'm so overwhelmed. Like, I guess that's what I'm getting at. Like, I want to be overwhelmed. I want my sentences to be like overwhelmed, like it is when you're
like getting high, or like
just like leaving our anxious everyday bodies and kind of coming into something literally.
I love that though. I think that's really beautiful, weirdly.
Do you?
Yeah, I do.
Thanks, you.
And I think I've probably been doing that. Like, I had so many hookups since writing this show.
Oh, right.
But a lot of the time I think, should I be doing that? Because actually I should be really like saving my energy.
No.
A lot of people that don't, like, I know people that are celibate by choice and they choose to not because they want to save their...
They're celibate and they don't
want to waste their, like, I spoke to
They also don't masturbate.
A friend of mine, he was like, I don't want to give my cum to anyone. Actually, I don't
know.
How
long has it been?
I don't know if he masturbates, but I don't think he does. I think he said if he needed to, he would, but like...
I have a friend, an author who has a book coming out on literally the same day as mine, Melissa Phoebos, which is about her year of celibacy, called The Dry Season. And it's terrific. It's absolutely out of sight. And it's like so much more than that sounds like. Yeah. So maybe he's achieving something like what she achieved, which is this so much more.
Thank you for coming in and
thanks,
seeing
Jeremy.
us.
Thanks, guys.
And good luck with the release. We'll put the things we discussed in the episode description.
Oh my gosh.
Including a pre-order link.
Yeah. Well, I think we're putting this out in June when it's out. So
including a buy now link.
Yeah. Go and buy the book.
Although I always think it makes more sense to put it out before, because then you get pre-orders and that boosts you up the chart. So I don't know why they always want to
I don't know, but
anyway,
let's not argue
about
that.
We got to go because we got shit to do.
Oh my gosh. Thanks,
Thank
guys.
you so much,
Deep House is out now.
Yes, grab a copy.